Welcome back to Help I'm Teaching Sunday School. This has been pretty great because StreamYard has got some new features. Not only are we able to pull people out of the past, but they have actually a new feature where we're able to pull people who didn't even exist. And here's somebody we have today who is from one of Jesus' parables.
It's great new technology from our friends at StreamYard.
Mm-hmm. They really are upping their game this year. So we have with us the father from the parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. Sir, welcome. Glad to have you with us today.
Great to be with you. This is my first time on this. It's fantastic. I feel like a real person. Would you like me to tell my story and the story of my son?
Yeah. We'll do the intro video and then we'll go right into it.
Fabulous.
As we said, welcome back to Help I'm Teaching Sunday School. We have with us today the father from the parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. So, sir, take it away. Tell us the story.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Pastor and Teacher Paul. It's great to be here. But I have to point out that you introduced this as the parable of the prodigal son, and that's really not a good title. I don't know who gave it that title, because probably somebody, way back when they were writing the King James Bible or something. But the editors, I think, missed the point. Because, first of all, how many of you that are watching know what prodigal means? Anybody? Raise your hands if you know what it means. Okay. Well, whatever you said, and maybe some of you got it right, prodigal means something that maybe you don't know the true meaning of. Prodigal means wasteful. Somebody who's prodigal is a spendthrift. He throws his money around like a sailor on leave. So, this is a story about a son who is a wasteful son. But before I start my story, you have to know, in the scriptures, in Luke 15, there are two stories that precede mine. And they really have an important part to play, because it sets up the story of what I like to call the parable of the loving and ever-forgiving father. The first story is the parable of the lost sheep. The lost sheep is a great intro, because it says there was a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of them went away. He took off on his own, a very, very nasty sheep. So the shepherd roamed all over the place. He probably climbed over mountains, forded streams, did all sorts of things to find a sheep. He finally finds it, and then he picks it up and carries it home. By the way, if you've ever tried to carry, I'm a farmer, If you've ever tried, and I have sheep, if you've ever tried to carry a sheep on your shoulders, you'll find that it's very hard. First of all, sheep are all full of burrs and prickly things, and they scratch your neck, and they don't want to cooperate. Such is the life of sheep. Well, that will play into the parable a little bit later. So anyway, when I got home after my long journey back with his wayward sheep, I said to my friends and neighbors, "My sheep was lost and now it's found." And what did we do? We had a party. And the second parable is a parable of a woman who had 10 silver coins. They might have been one of the coins that was in her wedding headdress. Very expensive. She swept the house. She cleaned everywhere. She looked into her husband's sock drawer, everywhere. And finally she found that lost coin that was so precious to her. And so she got her friends and neighbors together and said, "Rejoice with me. I found the lost coin." And she probably threw a party. And now we get to the misnamed parable of the prodigal son. This parable doesn't have a lost coin or a lost sheep, as precious as they may be. This parable has a story about a son. If you lost a sheep, maybe you wouldn't weep. And for a lost coin, well, you know, it's tragic, but not that bad. But to lose a son, that is really, really sad. And so, basically, what happened is I had two sons. One who is going to go away, and another one who stayed. Both of them have problems. The younger son said words to this effect. And there's a little poem I'd like to read you. The younger son said to his father, in essence, "Now listen, Pop, I've had my fill. Go to your safe and get the will. I'm tired of living neath your roof." This younger son was so uncouth. "Just give me my fair share of loot. I'll take the cash and then I'll scoot." Well, this is a problem because, you see, if he wants his inheritance, what he's asking for is inheritance. But as you probably know, you don't get the inheritance, especially way back when I lived. You don't get the inheritance unless your father has already died. So what the son is really saying is, "You're dead to me. Give me my share of the money." So the father gave him the money. Here's a little poem on it. Reluctantly, this dad decided that my estate would be divided equally between each boy. I split the cash, but had no joy. My heart was heavy, for I knew the foolish things my son might do. It wasn't long before my child had packed his bags and was beguiled by wanderlust for distant places. He sped from home and left no traces. No sooner had he begun to wander than his cash he began to squander. He went to nightclubs, spent some money, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, danced with girls with pretty faces, went to some forbidden places. He gambled with some shady guys, was in a fight, got two black eyes. He smoked cigars and shot some pool, and all lay the fool, because life had played a nasty joke upon this wasteful smarty pants who played around with high finance. Well, he lost all of his money. He squandered it as it was nothing. And then he was broke. Not only was that bad, but a famine struck in the land. And so he had to kind of cinch up his belt. He didn't know where to get any money. He didn't know how to earn it. And so he finally found a farmer. And he said, "Please, give me some employment." He says, "Well, young feller, I need someone who can slop my hogs, and you will do." Well, I don't know if you know about the culture of the time, but nobody loved hogs back in ancient Israel. Pigs were the least desirable animal. Lots of laws, which you can read about in the book of Leviticus. Anyway, he had to feed the pigs, and they fed them with these pods, these tubers, and he was so desperate and so hungry, he even maybe tried to gnaw on these things, but his his teeth weren't good enough to break open these things. And so the pigs were well fed, but he was starving. So he thought to himself, you know, back home, my father has plenty of food. And here I am slopping the hogs and I'm starving. So I think what I'm going to do is go back to my father and say, Pop, um, I'm sorry. I made a fool of myself, and maybe if I'm lucky, he'll take me out of as one of his hired men. After all, the hired people back at my dad's ranch were, oh, they were eating well. And so I traveled back. And so he traveled back. And as he was coming up the road, I could see him. He was a long way off. And so I hitched up my robe. That's something that Jewish men would never do. Fathers of Jewish men didn't show their ankles. That was kind of it'd be sort of like it's embarrassing. It'd be sort of like going out in public with your zipper down. It just wouldn't do. So in front of all of his servants and in front of his wife and in front of all the neighbors who would see him as he went down the road, he hiked up his robes and did another thing that Jewish men wouldn't have done. He ran. Jewish men displaced as little atmosphere as they could. They walked, the head of the household walked slowly, but not this time. He ran to his son, and his son fell down on his knees. And my son fell down on his knees, and he said, "Oh, Father, I've been rotten in the trouble I have gotten." And I threw my arms around him, and I hugged him because I was so glad that my lost son had been found. And so I took him home, and I told all the servants, put a ring on his finger, bring him the best robes, and what's more, kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a party. We've got to celebrate because this son of mine who was lost is now found. Well, I hired a bunch of musicians. We had a dance floor. The whole neighborhood was invited in. It was a fantastic party. And while the music was playing, my older boy was out in the field, like he usually was, counting the crops. My younger son was a wasteful boy, but my older son was a penny pincher. He was really only interested in keeping the wealth. He was out in the fields counting beans while the music was playing, and he came up to me as I went out to see him, and I was going to invite him into the party. And he looked at me and he said, "I'm not going in." He doesn't even call him my brother. He says, "This son of yours went out and spent all his money. He wasted it, probably did terrible things with it. But I'm here. I stayed." But Pop, you never even gave me one billy goat to have a party with my friends. Well, that was kind of stupid because I gave him half my inheritance, if you remember. I split the cash between the two kids. And if he wanted to, he could have thrown a party anytime he wanted. After all, he was in charge of the farm now. So I said to him, "My son, everything that I have is yours. But we should rejoice because your brother was dead and now is alive again. He was lost, but he's found. Well, that's where Jesus ended the story. And it's a strange story about love and forgiveness and about waywardness and waste. And so I hope you have enjoyed the story. And now we can maybe talk a little bit about it. Right,
Yeah.
Pastor Jacob?
Let's do that. That would be great. Thank you once again. We have Dr. Jeff Burkhart with us from Concordia University in St. Paul, Minnesota, who is kind enough to join us and to present these characters for us today.
We wanted him for one episode, and we got him for 3.
We got him for 3. It was amazing. So, Paul, thank you. He was one of Paul's professors when he was there at Concordia in St. Paul. Let's go ahead and take a look at the really the whole chapter of Luke chapter 15. And one of the things about this one that is really just kind of gives you the key to where Jesus is going with this is Luke, as he's telling the story, introduces it in the first couple of verses, where he says this: "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" And so then Jesus tells these 3 parables from there. Whenever the gospel writers give us the context for the parables, that's going to be very helpful. In this case, especially in determining, as people are listening to Jesus tell this, how are people going to find themselves in the parable, and where should we find ourselves in the parable then too? So
let's talk about the first one.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the first one, right? You have the parable of the lost sheep, where you have a guy. Well, yeah. Any one of you two either of you two have it in front of you? You could read verses 3 through 7.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Paul.
So he told them this parable: "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance."
Yeah. So as Dr. Burkhardt did a good job of explaining it, this is not the way that you usually do things. Maybe if you got 100 sheep and one gets really, really lost, if you lose that,
that's your tax write-off.
I mean, yeah,
the cost to benefit ratio, they call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it costs you more to get the sheep than just to leave them go.
It may very well. I mean, what Jesus is describing here is probably something above and beyond what a typical shepherd would do. You might just let that one go, but not Jesus. When Jesus is the good shepherd doing this, he's going to go out and he's going to get that one sheep. Okay, so that right there, we've talked about this before with Jesus' parables, that always when Jesus tells a parable, there's something, it's like real life, but then there's something ridiculous. There's a ridiculous twist on it. And here we get a couple, and this is the first one. Even if you bring home a lost sheep, even if you go out and find it, you're not going to go tell everybody. And everybody's going to be like, "Well, why'd you lose the sheep in the first place?" Right?
Yeah.
But no, in this case, there is joy, and that is one of the themes that you can definitely see running through all 3 of these. And this is part of the point that Jesus is making, the joy over those who are reunited. And especially we're looking at this as, the tax collectors would see themselves as that lost sheep, here that Jesus has brought me back. And the Pharisees and scribes would probably see themselves as those 99 sheep that have stayed and not wandered away.
And the thing that I heard one time, I think this is true. I don't know if I ever backed it up a whole bunch with research or anything. But you see the picture. We had one at home. I had one in my last classroom of all of the sheep together, right? With Jesus, the Good Shepherd. I'm sure Jacob's going to get one right now.
Is the one with him smiling and carrying the sheep on his shoulders?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That one right there. Yep.
Everybody's got one of those.
Yeah, here it is.
Yeah. And one time I heard that story about that sheep, that the shepherd, if the sheep kept running away, the shepherd would have to break that sheep's legs. So that way it couldn't run away anymore. And then he'd have to carry it because it couldn't walk with the broken legs. And so I think you can see that sometimes with people too, when they have to be a little bit broken before they realize how much they need to be next to the Good Shepherd.
That's certainly what happens in the third parable then too. You see the joy that, okay, so maybe you wouldn't throw that much of a party for a lost sheep, but certainly there's rejoicing in heaven. The angels are celebrating when people come to faith, when people return and confess their sins and receive forgiveness too. All right, so let's do the lost coin then too. Dr. Burkhardt, do you have that?
Yeah.
Verses 8 through 10.
Sure. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents.
So it's very similar to the first parable, only now we have a woman instead of a man here. And it's not the usual setup that Jesus gives for a parable where he'll say there's a certain man or a certain king or something like this. The first one he sets up is, well, wouldn't you do this? And what man of you would do this? Or then what woman of you would do this here too?
And is Jesus expecting oh yes, we would do this, or no, I probably wouldn't do that?
Well, I think he's trying to get you to say, well, yeah, I would do that, even though at first it's like, that's the twist. Like, I don't think I would do that if I lost something and then would go and tell everybody that I found something that I had lost.
I don't know. Anybody ever lose their wallet?
Yes, I lost my wallet at SeaWorld one time. It ruined my day.
Yeah. I haven't ever lost my wallet, like, outside the house. I just sometimes forget where I put it. And sometimes that drives me crazy. And my wife is usually one who finds it because, but I'm running around the house trying to find it. I said, oh, is it in this pocket or that pocket? We do this. If a child, for example, were to have, when I was a little boy, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I had a little dog, a little stuffed dog, and it went with me everywhere. I mean, I just loved it. I'm sure just about everybody's got a toy like that. And if I would have lost that dog, one time my mom washed it, and I didn't know where it was. I was panic-stricken. So I think people figured out, if you lost something that was really, really important to you, and for a shepherd, losing one sheep might have been a pretty significant disaster because shepherds were the lowest on the totem pole.
Especially if it's someone else's sheep, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. So, that's a great point. It may he's just maybe a hireling who's taking care of it,
Yeah.
and if the guy who owns them, in this case that could be God, would be disappointed if that shepherd didn't go out and find
sheep.
Yeah.
Well, I think it says a man of you having 100 sheep. So this is like the hireling lost it, and the owner, the big farm guy, the father in the parable, he's the one after Candy or Little Joe or Hoss screwed up. He's the one who's going out to get the actual sheep.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah.
Bonanza reference for the win. That's great. One of the other things that is probably significant to notice between these two is the percentage of things that are lost. Where the first parable, 1% of the sheep are lost. Here now in the parable of the lost coin, we have 10% is lost. 10% of the coins that the woman has. So we're kind of escalating here as we go through these. So let's go to the next one. I'm going to read the first half of the first paragraph of the prodigal son. Okay. So, and he said to them, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So, Dr. Burkhardt, again, you did a great job of kind of showing us the real slap in the face that this is for the father. I mean, Dad, I wish you were dead. Is basically what the son is saying. Goes and wastes it all. And yeah, so that's, we don't use that word. I don't know if we use that word prodigal anywhere else, or at least use it correctly anywhere else. But it's wasteful, right? And so that's where I think that was the Latin word, actually, is where that comes from. To drive away or squander is what that where that word comes in. Where
the root word or
yeah. So the one of the examples that the dictionary gave of what the Greek word there means is to drive or to dissipation with no chance of return. So squandering, basically. And one of the examples that the dictionary gives of this kind of living is bathing your feet in spiced wine, which sounds very expensive and very fancy,
I think I watched, there was a reality show about these really rich kids, whatever, and one of them was like, oh yeah, I shower in bottled water. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
But so here he goes from being the son of this farmer who's doing pretty well to nothing. When pig food looks good, you kind of hit the bottom there.
Yeah. Now the farmer would have split his land into thirds, right? And given the older son 2/3 and the younger son 1/3.
I believe it works some way like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. So let's go on. And if somebody would read, what you would read 17 through 24, we can kind of get where this goes next, where he goes and comes back to the father.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. Is that as far you want, or do you want?
Yeah, that's a good place to stop right there. I find it really interesting. Is what is his motivation at this point for wanting to go home?
He doesn't have good motivation.
He's hungry.
He is what we call hedging his bets. He's hoping that if he goes back and says to my father, look, I've sinned against heaven and against you, please take me on as one of your hired men, that maybe his father will relent and say, okay, you can do that. He doesn't have real expectation, I think, that he's actually going to be taken back, but he figures if I give a good enough story, maybe then it'll work. Yeah. I don't think his motivation at this point is all that pure, but I suppose that's a matter of opinion.
Yeah. I remember teaching this, and there's a question in the book like, when do you think the prodigal son truly repents? When has he actually realized the error of what he's done?
And it may not be until he actually gets back and
Yeah.
sees his
I
father
think so.
again. Yeah, that he really truly does. Yeah. I'll read on from there. We stopped halfway through verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. So you just imagine the father sitting there on the porch, heartbroken, and just hoping maybe someday I'll see my son again. And then one day, there he is, way off in the distance, and he can't. You describe well the indignity that he goes through to hike up his robes and run to his son. You don't do that, but here he does. He has compassion and runs up and he kisses him. And one of my favorite details of this is that the son does not. We had in the verses before where he rehearses the whole speech. And this is what I'm going to say, right? He doesn't get the whole thing out for one of two reasons. I'm not sure which one it is. Either his father just interrupts him and won't let him, doesn't care about what he's saying, or because he finally realizes that he doesn't need to earn his father's love again.
Why not both?
Maybe a little bit of both. Yeah.
I like that. You can imagine like the father and the mom probably too, just sit on the porch, worrying every night, and the house faces west, and as the sun comes down every night, hoping someday their boy will come back. And then finally one day it does.
I think if you imagine this as a drama, and as the son is standing there waiting for his father, which is interesting in itself. Does the son just let his father come, or does the son see him running toward him and then come? It could be played either way, but I think dramatically, I think he sees his father with open arms, and he runs to him. And as he's speaking, he says, he may have been thinking, I got to get my lines right now.
Yeah.
I better get my lines right. I mean, he could be thinking that, not running to his father. He could be saying, I better get this right. And his father embraces him, and he says, I've sinned against heaven and against you. That's a great confession. And he's going to go on, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And he may have gone, and his father would go, enough.
No more.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is unconditional love.
Yeah.
And that's what breaks the child's heart and leads to true repentance.
Yeah, and so then you have the joy that just overflows, right?
Oh, yeah.
We've got to celebrate. We've got to, here bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the shoes. Here he is. He's all beat up and his clothes are probably tattered or something like that. Bring the best stuff we've got, put it on him. He's got to look the part, look like my son. I want to show everybody that yes, here he is. And kill the fatted calf. Now, when I was in Uganda last year, I kind of learned what a big deal this is. Because think of a world without refrigeration. What's the difference between eating a goat and eating a cow? All right,
there's a lot more to eat.
There's a lot more to eat, right? So you say
a bigger party.
A bigger party, exactly, right. So like when I was there at the seminary, and we had all these goats around, and when I left, there was a get together, and they served a goat, And they were saying, we're really looking forward to the day when we can have a cow party. And there's like one cow sitting there on the seminary campus. And they're like, they got their eye on you for that. They're waiting for that day. But you can see the scale of who's invited. I mean, you're gonna have enough people over to eat a cow, together. That's a lot of people who are coming together for this. This is a big party. Killing the fatted cat.
It's a Texas barbecue. It's a Texas barbecue.
Yeah,
and you can just imagine it's a hoedown, and they're having a wonderful time. And something about, I've asked this of people when I've told this parable before, and I hope I got the fatted calf in while I was doing it. I can't remember exactly what I said. I hope I didn't want to miss the fatted calf. So here's my opportunity if I missed that in the story, because it's one of the most significant parts of the story. If there's an author by the name of Robert Capon, he had a book called Kingdom, Grace, and Judgment, which he explains the parables of Christ. And one of the things he says is, the fatted calf is the most important person in the story, or character in the story. And he says, the fatted calf is Jesus.
Yeah.
Who has been waiting through this whole thing. And when the fatted calf is sacrificed, now there is a true banquet. The banquet now really begins. And I think I would recommend that book to you. It's a very interesting take on the parables. And one of the things about Capon, he is an unabashed lover of the gospel. And that's why I enjoy reading his work. But the fatted calf could be a representative of Jesus himself, who waits around and finally is killed for the sins of the world. And in that moment, we are freed from the power of death and sin, and are given grace.
Yeah.
And the family's whole again.
Families back together again.
Well, almost.
Right. So let's just to back up a second. So we've got we had a party for one lost sheep. We had a party for one lost coin. Now we've got and those were kind of like, well, I'm not sure you would actually do that. But now you've got a party for a lost son. This makes sense, right? This you're going to do. This doesn't look strange anymore. And I think Jesus is very intentional in telling the story that way, right? And up until this point, all of the three parables have been the same. You have something that's lost, something that's restored, and you have a party that goes after it. This last chunk of the parable, this is where this one gets different, because we never got to hear from the 99 sheep. We never got to hear from the 9 coins. Now we get to hear from the son who stayed. Paul, would you read 25 to 32 for us?
Yeah. Now the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you. I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, the father's saying this now, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.
So you pointed out well that there's a problem here also with the older son too, and he has a problem with the grace that the father is extending. He expects to relate to his father in the relationship of their activity, of their behavior, right? Look at what I've done. I've never disobeyed you. I've served you all these, I've slaved for you all these years. And you've never once done anything for me. Yeah, and you said he would have been willing to do that had he asked. And so now he's offended by the grace that the father is extending to his brother.
It's kind of weird that the father didn't send someone out to go get the older brother. Right? The older brother hears it and then's like, well, what's going on? You would think the father would say, hey, oh, go get Jacob out in the field, but he doesn't. And the son has to the older son has to kind of find out on his own. And we tease, we call the older son Jacob because Jacob is the older brother. And now that's close to Christmas time, almost every Christmas we heard the story of, oh, remember that Christmas where we just had Jacob? You just had Jacob, and he would open a present. He would play with that toy for an hour. And then he would go and open another one. And it was just the greatest Christmas ever, watching little Jacob open present after present as the rest of us would just dig into all the presents all at once, and we tease.
I did too when I was older. And
Yeah.
Not a parable about us. Our parents don't have any property for us to divide.
Exactly. We're just teasing. But this older son is I think, he makes the accusation, as Dr. Carter would say, he was spending his time with women of ill repute. And we don't, how would he know? Maybe word got back, if we set this in the modern day, he's still friends with his brother on Facebook and sees all the crazy things he's posting, who knows? But, he makes this claim. We don't know exactly how he squandered his wealth because the older brother isn't, we don't know him to be an honest narrator in what he's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And but the father goes out to him too. He goes out for the younger son, and now again he leaves the house, leaves the party, and goes out for the older son, because now the older son is the one who is the lost son, and goes out to him and says, "Okay, all right, so you're always with me. Everything I've got is yours. I love you still. You still belong. You belong to me. You're my son." That's why the younger son is accepted back. It's not because he's so sorry or not because of anything like that. It's because that's his son. He loves him because of that. That's the same reason why this older son is welcomed back and invited back to the party. You're my son. Come on back. Come on in. Come into the party. He entreats him. I think it says there, right? Yeah. His father went out and entreated him in verse 28. And then it's fitting. It's for us to do this. Your brother was dead. He's alive. He's lost and is found. And that's where Jesus leaves it off. Leaves the parable there. And it's very, very intentional that Jesus ends that parable there. He doesn't tell us what happens because now, at least in the context of Luke's 15, it's up to the Pharisees and the scribes who they saw themselves, the 99 sheep, the 9 coins. Here's the older son who never went astray, never did anything. Here you are. God is throwing this party because people are repenting. People are coming to faith. Are you going to come in and join the party? Come on in. Come and enjoy this. Come be thankful that these your brothers and sisters who are sinners are being received back into God's mercy and his grace. Are you going to be excited about that, or are you going to sit outside pouting?
Yeah. All you have to do is come into your own house.
Yeah, the Pharisees, like the older brother, think too highly of themselves. And like the older brother thinks that he is being, if you will, upstaged by this younger brat who squandered everything, and the older brother says, "You've wasted your money on women of ill repute." We don't know that. There's no place in the story that says that. He just squandered his money. Well, we can imagine what he might have squandered it on, but it doesn't say.
It
But
actually says that, yeah.
he puts the absolute worst construction on his brother. All right, and so this invitation of the father to come inside to him is an insult. Isn't that interesting? The Pharisees, Jesus knows the Pharisees think everything I say about them is an insult. Well, a lot of times it was.
You know, a lot of times it was. And
But
why they had him crucified eventually.
right. But for the purpose of trying to bring them into the fold, to bring them back into the flock. They're the lost. They're the lost sheep in the flock, as it were. So
what do we get to see in this is God's incredible grace poured out for people who are straying, people who are lost, the forgiveness, and then the invitation for us to come and join them too.
It reminds me a lot of the story of Jonah, especially the ending. You know, there's, well, what are you, good person? What are you going to do about this grace now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, realize that this grace is here for you too. And we want you to come and enjoy this too and to be part of this. I mean, if the angels are rejoicing, if the angels are throwing a party in heaven because of this, then we ought to be thankful for the grace that God is extending to us and to other people then too. We're all welcome back. Yeah.
Could I read the last part of my poem on this?
Oh, please do.
Very good. This happens right after the father says, so once again, let joy abound. My son was lost, but now is found. That's all there was to Jesus' story, but it sure was inflammatory to all who, like the older brother, lacked in love for one another. It showed self-centered Pharisees who, filled with petty jealousies, that they should not be so reclusive and their sinners be abusive. For those who truly are repentant, God's prepared a place transplendent, where rejoicing will redound when everyone that's lost is found. And when you've sinned and lost your way, and you're repentant when you pray, remember what you just have heard and listen to his saving word. And then Jesus speaks. You are worth far more than sheep, and for lost coins I wouldn't weep. But I am seeking to accost the wayward ones who are so lost that they despair of being saved, because they've sinned and misbehaved in ways that keep them from the way, the truth, the life. And so I say, my sons and daughters, come to me. I lived, I died, I rose to free you from your sin. So come, confess, and with a new life I will bless each one who's truly penitent. That's why I came. It's why God sent me to the earth from heaven above. So come, partake of God's great love.
Dr. Burkhardt, thank you so much for joining us. Paul, good to see you again. We will see you next week.
Thanks again.